This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. My name is Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler.
And this is, as they used to say in the TV business about pretty much every episode, this is a very special episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast.
But it really is. It is a very special episode. We kid you not. It really is.
Absolutely. It was just a year ago. It's just as we are doing this today, it is February 14th. It's Gil's birthday, everybody. Happy birthday, Gil. It's Gil's,
Thank you very much.
It's Gil's birthday. And we were just talking about the fact that a year ago today, I certainly did not wish you a happy birthday. I think it was just before we began to do this. The idea of doing the podcast of the making of Bordello of Blood had just begun to well, I was having those initial discussions with Jason Stein at the Dads from the Crypt. And the stories I'd been telling socially for 20 years, 25 years, to kind of, as a balm to my soul, I don't know, it suddenly seemed like a great way to get a great story off my chest. That was really my biggest motivation when I first sat down. I thought, well, I could stretch this out to, I don't know, maybe 5 episodes or so. And that's really what I initially set out to do. And before I could actually do it the way that I really wanted to, I had to have at least one person on board, and that was you. And as we have described,
yeah, and I wasn't so sure about doing it because I sort of felt like it was painful when we did it, and we really want to revisit the pain. But you were very convincing. And I'm glad you were.
I know I didn't realize how much I needed the catharsis when I started down the road, but the catharsis was properly cathartic. And the strange thing was that when I got to the end, and the I had kind of become a we in my thinking, and when we got to the end of telling the whole story at the end of the whole 10 episodes of the first season that we did, suddenly I realized what the story was about, and it wasn't about the movie per se. It was about a relationship, this creative relationship, but also this friendship, and the fact that this dumb movie destroyed both of those things. And the irony is that going in and doing the podcast about Bordello of Blood, about the thing that destroyed the relationship, remade the relationship to a degree. It reinvented the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, think of the irony of that, and yet it's quite delicious. That irony doesn't happen that often.
Yeah,
and so I think people are very grateful for that.
That telling the story became part of the story in essence, and in the best way possible. And so with that thought in mind, we wanted to, instead of having to listen to episode 1, then episode 2, episode 3, hey, why not put the whole thing together? We've edited them together with a little bit of interesting filler in between. We also will talk about at the very end. There's a little bit of information about there's a new show that Gil and I are about to take out into the marketplace. It's called Are You Afraid? And we'll be dropping hints about it via our podcast and other social media in the near future. We really do look forward to talking about it and telling you all about it. We're really and truly excited about it. But before we get to that, we wanted to give you the whole schmear, the whole 5 episodes packed into one tasty swallow.
So enjoy.
This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hi, I'm Alan Katz, and this is the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, the making of Bordello of Blood. Now, why would anyone give a crap about the making of a mediocre little horror movie that came out 1,000 years ago? Well, the answer is because, strangely, that movie still makes the rounds every Halloween. Like a zombie, it won't die. But then, Tales from the Crypt presents Bordello of Blood, its full title, was never even supposed to be in the first place. In a world where getting feature films made is so hard, where you have to really want to make a movie just to get it off the ground, we made a movie that literally nobody making it wanted to make. Not a one of us. Not for 2 seconds. Bordello came together perversely like a movie monster built of spare parts. A soulless, heartless, mindless movie monster. Actually, the story of how and why Bordello got made is quite relevant to the present. It's an object lesson in what happens when you do things for all the wrong reasons. Spoiler alert, nothing good. Just my humble opinion, I believe we're about to enter a time where doing things for the right reasons is going to become incredibly important. Here's something else I think is really important that we nail down up front. This story is going to hurt to tell. The making of Bordello was a kind of personal Waterloo for me. In the 30 years since, a lot has happened. Some extraordinary highs, like my 2 kids, and some pretty low lows that threatened to wipe out all the highs. The good news? Hey, I bounced. This atheist got born again, not in a religious sense, in a life sense. Perspective's a wonderful thing, especially where storytelling is concerned. I have 0 axes to grind in telling you this story. Hey, I'm here to confess my sins. I intend to say as honestly as I can what I contributed to this fiasco, and there was plenty. I will interview everyone who'll still speak to me. Production team, the actors, our crew up in Vancouver, and my old creative partner, Gil Adler. Bordello's director, its co-writer, and producer. Helping me tell you this story, my producing partners on this podcast, is a Tales from the Crypt fan group called Dads from the Crypt. Thank you guys for your passion. By the time Bordello briefly hit theaters in 1994, Gil and I were no longer a team. That, too, is part of this story. How a dumb movie broke up a really good friendship. Look, as far as I'm concerned, no one else in this story has anything to be ashamed about. I mean that. No one. Except me. And Sylvester Stallone. We'll get there. In order to understand how we got to Bordello of Blood, you have to understand how we got to Tales from the Crypt. By we, I mean my creative partner at the time, Gil Adler, and I. In addition to also producing Bordello with me, Gil directed the movie. Since he was directing, most of the daily producing chores fell to me. Creative relationships are exactly like marriages. They can be solid, respectful, and enduring, or wild, explosive, and totally bonkers. My relationship with Gil was very much the first kind. Gil wasn't just my creative partner, he was my best friend. By the time he and I made Bordello, we'd been working and playing together for 9 years. We'd written screenplays together, co-written episodes of the Freddy's Nightmares TV series, which Gil produced and also directed, and together, we'd written and produced, resurrected really, what was HBO's biggest show at the time, Tales from the Crypt. A quick side note for perspective, I grew up a film buff. I loved movies. Loved old movies. Loved silent movies, too. I loved the Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields. I loved Casablanca and Gone with the Wind. I loved the whole Hollywood world. To have ended up in Hollywood getting to work with some of the very people whose movies and film work I loved? Move over, Lou Gehrig. I consider myself
the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
So, me in a nutshell. I grew up in an upper-middle-class Jewish suburb of Baltimore. I went to Vassar, where I majored in drama. A high school friend, Carol Yumkis, became an agent at William Morris in L.A. She suggested I write a screenplay, so I did. And in June 1985, at Carol's urging, I flew out to L.A. from New York for a week of meet and greet. I'd been to L.A. once before when I was 14. To me, A hardcore East Coaster and a burgeoning New Yorker, LA was the stupidest place on the planet. It was the land of the avocado head. But everyone in LA was so nice to me. They said lovely things about my screenplay. My agent Carol took me to a big Hollywood opening. St. Elmo's Fire. It was pretty intoxicating. Well, back in New York, it was 90 degrees and humid as hell. Here in LA, there is no humidity. It was perfect. By my third day, I'd sold out completely.
Welcome to Hollywood, kid.
The land of the avocado head was now my home. Gil was among the very first producers I met that first week in LA, and it was Gil's convincing enthusiasm plus his insistence that I'd be crazy to stay in New York that closed the deal. Now, since our estrangement all those years ago, Gil and I, we've chatted occasionally. But doing this podcast, this was the first time we've really talked about our past together. We seem to hit it off in the room.
You think? Historically, if you look at it, we met that day, and then I think we probably met almost every day thereafter for the next, 10 years.
Of all the things that I never expected to find in Los Angeles was a life, a career, and a best friend.
Well, thanks for saying that. I felt the same way.
The first thing that we really started working on together was Love and Linoleum was very much your personal story,
Yeah.
Fictionalized.
I enjoyed that process. I mean, it conjured up a lot of things that I hadn't thought about for years. But even so, it was, I thought it was a fun experience doing it with you. The only thing that I would have liked better than what's happened with it is that it had gotten made.
You came up as an accountant and you worked for Sid Finger doing all the bond books, right? I'm remembering all this correctly, right?
Yeah. I was a junior in college and I came
at Syracuse.
At Syracuse. And I came into town. I was taking education classes at NYU. I taught in a minority school where I was the smallest and whitest guy in the class, in the room. Juniors and seniors in high school. And while I was doing that, I wanted to make some money. So I go to NYU in the morning for classes. And then in the afternoon, I answered an ad in the New York Times, and it was this guy, Sid Finger. The summer before that, I answered an ad in the New York Times, and I got a job at 20th Century Fox preparing statements for participants, those people who have shared in a movie or a TV show. So it was a very narrow arena of what my knowledge was in terms of the accounting. So when I called for this job, I didn't know who Sid Finger was.
Sid Finger was a very big entertainment accountant.
Yeah, he had a monopoly on everything. He said, "What kind of experience have you had?" And I told him, and he said, "You were over 20th Century Fox preparing statements. When can you come? Can you come right now? Where are you right now?" What Gil learned at the feet of movie accounting legend Sid Finger was the most basic rule of being a movie producer. If you have $1 to make your movie, don't go spending $1.01, because you ain't got it.
And the other axiom is you have $1 to spend.
Yeah.
If you're a smart producer, you'll get $1.15 worth of product.
Yes, and if you can spend 99 cents to get that $1.15 worth of product, or 98 cents.
Right.
Now, prior to working for Sid Finger, had you ever thought about working in the film business?
Oh yeah, I always wanted to be in the theater or the film business. I answered an ad in the New York Times, and I got a job. It was for the New York State Council on the Arts. And all of a sudden I interviewed and I got this job, which in those days was paying great money. And I became the director of grants for the New York State Council on the Arts. And the chairman was Kitty Carlisle Hart.
Like a blind guy figuring out an elephant, Gil found his way into the movie business. And he ended up teaching a class in movie making with director Brian De Palma, who, at that point in his career, had Phantom of the Paradise, Obsession, Carrie, and The Fury under his belt. And this class that Gil and Brian ended up teaching, well, that turns into a surreptitiously made feature film called
Home Movies, starring Kirk Douglas, Vinnie Gardenia, Nancy Allen, who then became Mrs. De Palma for a while, Garrett Graham, and Keith Gordon. And that's how I learned to make a movie. I lived in the production office in Sarah Lawrence campus. I slept on a cot, no air conditioning, which drove me crazy. But we made this movie.
What took you out to Los Angeles?
I had raised a little bit of money in Switzerland to develop screenplays. And I hired off-Broadway, who later became Broadway, and well-known writers to write 4 screenplays.
none of which were good enough for me to get made, or I wasn't good enough to get them made. But they never happened. So I lost $100,000. But while I was doing that, a friend of mine, a guy named Mike DeLuise, who was working at an ad agency that covered, that placed our ads for Coca-Cola in the New York Times and all the New York papers.
The Coca-Cola that Gil referred to wasn't the soft drink. It was a show. It's 1973. One of the first theater shows that Gil produced in New York was a riotous comedy which he found at the Edinburgh Theatre Festival called El Grande de Coca-Cola. Among the young unknowns in Gil's cast are Ron Silver and Jeff Goldblum. Here's the interesting detail. The first show that I ever saw in New York was at the Mercer Arts Center in 1973, El Grande de Coca-Cola. Freaky, huh? So Gil's friend Mike DeLuise hooks Gil up with a guy named Andrew Sugarman, who's written a movie that he wants Gil to produce for him called Up the Pentagon.
And so it was supposed to be a comedy, and it was like the Carry On movies in English, the Carry On Nurse. It was Up the Pentagon, then it was going to be Up the Fire Department. We only did Up the Pentagon. And like within months, he called me up, and I went back to New York. He called me up and he said, I want to do this other movie. It's 3 times the budget. It's $1.5 million. And I want you to produce it. And so I came back to Vancouver, and we shot this movie called Certain Fury with Tatum O'Neal, Irene Cara, and Peter Fonda. And that's how it started.
When Gil and I went aboard Crypt, it was going into its third and, for all intents and purposes, its final season. The producers had gone wildly over budget season 2, so Joel fired everybody. But a strange thing happened over the course of season 3 after Gil and I took over. Tales and the Crypt Keeper, well, they came back to life. By the time Gil and I finished producing season 3, HBO had ordered 2 more seasons.
Chris Albrecht, who I knew when he was an agent at ICM, he became the head of HBO. He had a series that was being shot in Savannah, Georgia, called Vietnam War Stories. Mm-hmm. And he called me up on a Sunday, and he says to me, I thought he was inviting me out for brunch, but actually he was asking me to get on a plane to go to Savannah. I thought Savannah was a restaurant in Santa Monica.
If only.
So I went to Savannah.
Great mimosas.
They didn't know I was coming. He hadn't. So when I got there, it was a little awkward. Anyway, I took over the show. They had been shooting 4 days. They only had 2 days in the can. So we shot all 6 episodes, and I brought it in, and it won Ace Awards. And, Chris acknowledged that I had done a good job, not only with the money, but that it looked great. And so that's what triggered when he got into a situation with the partners that they, had gone way over budget. He asked them to write a check, and they said they wouldn't do it. And so he said, I'm going to cancel the show. And then the only way that it sort of came about was I got a call from Chris one day, and he said to me, would you take that show over? And I said, well, I don't even know who, I don't know these guys. I don't know the partners. I don't know, I don't really know anything about it. And so he sent me over, I think, the first 6 episodes to look at that were pretty good. Some of them were good. And
Donner's first episode is amazingly good.
Donner's was good. Zemeckis was good. Walter Hill's was good. And so I was interested. I really thought, wow, this is, and these were big Hollywood directors and producers. So from that, Chris said to me, you got to go and meet with Joel Silver and Dick Donner. So I went over to meet them. And, Dick stayed about 10 minutes, and he said, yeah, you're okay, kid. You're okay. And he left, and I was there with Joel. And Joel, I'm sitting in this chair, which in his office, you would sit very, very low. He had a chair which was sort of lower than anything, almost on the floor. Anyway, he's pacing in front of his desk, and he's telling me, you got to do this, and it's got to look like a movie. It can't look like television. And, you've got to shoot 5 pages a day, every day. There's no breaking down, no days off, 5 days a week. And I looked at him, and I sort of jokingly said, what do we do after lunch? Which wasn't a good thing to have said, because he got really pissed off at me. So anyway, that's how we got to get Tales from the Crypt, because then Joel looked at me and he said, all right, just make sure it looks like a movie.
There was one more meeting, and that was
Yeah.
with Barry.
Barry Josephson. Yeah.
When we walked into that meeting at Silver Pictures and we sat in the boardroom,
Yeah.
the meeting I think was called for like 3:00, and 3:15 comes by, 3:20, 3:25, and your face is glued to your watch. You are
The
becoming
smoke was coming out of my ears.
increasingly incredulous
Yeah.
that this is how that this could happen. 3:30, 3:40, 3:45, and now you're beginning to say, all right, this is it. I'm going to get out of here. And you're kind of beginning to dare yourself to come on. We're going to walk out. We're just going to walk out 3:50, 3:55, and really at virtually the hour mark. Literally, you've had it. This is
Right.
almost an official hour of cooling your heels at Silver Pictures.
Right.
No idea that this is this is practice. And suddenly into the room, as we're literally about to walk out the door, literally into the room strolls Barry Josephson.
I must give you credit, however, for making sure that we were there that long. Because I think after a half hour, I was ready to just storm out of there and call HBO and say, these guys treat people like garbage, and I'm not interested in this. Goodbye, good luck.
Yeah. And that was never going to change.
And I think you were the one who maybe injected the Kool-Aid into my arm to calm down, simmer down, and let's play this one out.
Oh well, this was.
So
you have to understand, this was rarefied air for me.
Yeah.
I'm on the Warner Brothers lot now. We had worked together on a couple of episodes of Freddy's Nightmares,
Right.
but that was not this. Now we're talking about a show at HBO.
Yeah.
And once Barry signs off, this is a happening deal. This is really the last step.
Right.
And to me, I can taste the promise. I can see it. I'm Moses, and I'm like, screw what God says. I'm
Right.
I'm going there, motherfuckers. And
Well, I'm not exempt from being an asshole at times. I can do that.
but
You were the one. You were the one who calmed me down and said, "No, let's just stick this out. Let's see what happens."
the saving grace, the thing that calmed me down, that kept my spirit going, is they had the whole collection of all the Tales from the Crypt, the Weird Tales, every comic in the entire EC collection,
Vault of Horror,
hardbound, was there, and that was what kept me really, because I would pull down all the Tales from the Crypt, and I'd think, wow.
Right.
I mean, to me, I read those comic books when I was a kid. I loved the EC world. I loved Bill Gaines's world. This was close to a kind of a dream. My first encounter with Tales from the Crypt was a year before. Yeah, it was just after their first season. I was unemployed as usual, and I got to be a cable ace judge, and we judged writing. We had I got like a dozen things we were going to judge for writing for the Cable Ace Awards, and it was a bunch of things that looked okay, interesting. And the first three things we were going to watch were 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. The first 3 episodes, Donner's, Zemeckis's, and Walter Hill's. And the dozen or so writers unemployed writers who were there in the room, we all saw we were going to be watching 3 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, and collectively we all said out loud, "Oh, there's an hour and a half of time we won't get back." We all anticipated crap. And from the moment Donner's episode began rolling, it was the first one that they showed us, "Dig this cat, he's real gone." You could hear every writer's mind turning over going, "Get my fucking ass on this show.
Right.
This is brilliant."
Yeah.
And so to be standing in the boardroom at Silver Pictures with this promised land in sight, my friend, I would have been clutched to your ankle. Really, I would have tackled you. But that said, as the hour mark came, yes, you had me. It looked like we were being humiliated as we walked out. Barry Josephson walked in, and the meeting.
If I remember correctly, you may have threatened clutching onto something even more important than my ankle if I tried to get out of the room.
Entirely possible. Entirely possible.
But my recollection of the meeting with Barry was it lasted like 5 minutes, and he looked
Yeah.
at us and he went, "Oh yeah, good, okay."
Yeah. But
was it, right?
which is why it was so ludicrous. It was so typical. It was really just
Right.
it was the pure politics of Barry having to sign off. But Barry
Yeah.
is above all a political creature.
Yeah, and he turned out to be a really good guy for the most part while we were
Yeah.
working on that show and thereafter.
Yeah. Hey, this town attracts a certain kind of person. You cannot be surprised when that kind of people are who really operates in this town and operates successfully. It's not a business for shy retiring types.
Right.
It just ain't. You're not going to do well if you
Yeah.
try to do this. It requires a certain mindset. And hey, if Barry is kind of running Joel Silver's company, you got to figure Barry's going to have an awful lot of Joel in him.
Yeah.
And that
Well,
was the
in-
case
in
of
actual
everyone
fact-
who worked for Joel.
In actual fact, I found Barry really very reasonable. And as we worked more and more together, I quite liked him. I found him to be, very helpful, for getting politically what we needed to get when we needed to get it from Joel.
Yeah.
So I think, I thought ultimately, our being pissed at him for being so tardy and keeping us waiting, it turned out to be he was a good guy.
Joel was
Yeah.
was brutal to Barry, brutal. But that's
But he was
part of-
brutal to everybody.
yeah, it's
You
that's
know, I
part of
remember
his
going in-
mystique.
I remember going into his office occasionally and thinking, okay, what's this? Why did he call me? Only to get, creamed from him and screamed at from him for something that I didn't even know how am I related to this? What did I do
Yeah.
on this? But that was the relationship.
I was the add along that nobody wanted, and rightfully so, because I had no bona fides to do the job that I did on Crypt. It was really because they wanted you, and I was your writing partner.
But I had a secret weapon. That secret weapon was you,
Oh,
because I felt like that we could do this. I don't think I could do this alone. I was never good at writing alone. I would look at the computer screen and I could think of, maybe I should balance my checkbook today. Just everything, but somehow working with you, it just all clicked for me. And so I really felt like we could really fix this. We really know how to do this, and we can do it not only economically, but creatively.
let's stop here a second to pat ourselves on the back. When we went aboard Tales from the Crypt, the intention was that third season was the last season they were going to do. That was the end of Tales from the Crypt.
Right.
And we reinvigorated not only the franchise, but the Crypt Keeper,
Yeah.
which reinvigorated the franchise as a whole. And the fact that there were an order for 3 feature films, 2 of which got made,
Yeah.
was simply because of what you and I reinvented over the course of that first season that we took over Tales from the Crypt.
I think one of the highlights of our career, certainly my career, was when we wrote Yellow, that Bob was going to direct, and he got Kirk Douglas to do it. And meeting Kirk and being on the set every day with Bob.
The problem was he couldn't get Kirk initially, because the initial script that the Thomas brothers wrote for Yellow,
Correct.
Originally, the way that I think everyone was planning it, Yellow was going to be the last episode ever of Tales from the Crypt. It was going to be the big send-off.
Right.
Which, when in the middle of the season, suddenly it was decided that no, HBO is going to order a couple more seasons. It wasn't the end of the show. It was kind of a celebration because it was going to go on. The problem was Zemeckis wanted to pay an homage to one of his favorite films when he was a film student, Kubrick's Paths of Glory.
Right.
And that's why he wanted Kirk Douglas. It's a World War I story, and he wanted Kirk Douglas. The problem was the script that the Thomas brothers, those 2 feature guys wrote was just abominable. It was awful. And Zemeckis knew he could not possibly get, he couldn't even send it to his agency because it was just sucked so bad. So, we took it under our wing, we fixed it, and 1 or 2 drafts later, suddenly we had Kirk Douglas. Bob became a fan. And then watching Bob Zemeckis create World War I in Simi Valley. and he's directing our words.
Right.
Bob Zemeckis. is directing our words.
Yeah.
You know, we've kind of gone from one place to another in one giant leap.
Yeah.
This is, you know, when you're on the inside, it's funny, one tends to take certain things for granted after a while. But having spent a lot of time now on the outside of the whole thing, when I look back, I think, dude, did you not realize what you were experiencing?
Yeah.
Really?
No, it was special. It was special.
Oh my God.
I think back on it often and try to remember some of the lessons I learned during that whole process, because it was a very special time. It was a very special time working, the two of us working together, but it was also a very special time how big it got and how, you know, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Not in terms of money, not in terms of bigger budgets, but just bigger. The show became bigger.
We suddenly got, we got reviewed when we did our second season on the show's fourth. I remember when we got the reviews came out, and the reviews were really positive. I think that second season, we had Billy Friedkin directed for us, John Frankenheimer directed for us, and working with Billy was a hoot. And that was important because Billy would play a small part in the story that we were about to tell about Bordello of Blood. Billy did a terrific episode about the rock and roll world, about kind of garage bands.
Yeah.
When we first suggested Billy, because it was our idea, and Joel went to you, he said, "Are you out of your fucking mind? Billy's crazy. He's gonna fucking kill you." He was like, "What? Who am I talking to here?" You know, like, well, what? What?
Pretty good impression too. It was pretty accurate.
So, you know, but you the first time that Billy came in, you sat him down and you explained the rules that, you know, hey, this is 5 days of prep, 5 days to shoot. I don't care if you're Billy Friedkin, you're not getting a moment more. That's what you told him.
Yeah. Well, people have said, you know, I think before I met him, people had said to me, you better be careful because he can be pretty hot. And, you know, if you piss him off the wrong way, he might take a shot at you. You mean a punch? Yeah. Well, he might just punch you in the nose. And I was like, what? So I met him at Hugo's for breakfast, and we sat there, and I was like, I had this whole thing in my head. Look, you know, I don't care who you are. Bob Zemeckis does them in 5 days. Dick Donner does them in 5 days. We do them in 5 days. Alan and I won't give you a script that's a 6-day script and say it's your problem. We'll fix it until we all agree it's 5 days. And we won't let you go ahead unless you agree it's 5 days. And if you think you're going to, on day 3 or day 4, you know, screw us for another half a day or day, I'll fire you. I'll fire you on the spot, and I'll finish it. Alan will finish it. Zemeckis someone will finish it. And I remember as I'm sitting there at Hugo's, and I'm leaning further and further over the table across to him, and I'm realizing I'm getting a little bit emotional about this and how heated. And I'm going, holy shit, he's going to take a shot at me. He's going to get, and he leans over, meeting me. It's almost like a Seinfeld. He leans over, almost my head's matching, almost touching. And he goes, do you have any idea who the fuck you're talking to? And I thought, oh shit, here comes the punch right in my face. I'm going to have a black eye. And then I pulled back because I was afraid I was going to get hit. And then he pulled back, and he looks at me and he goes, I'm telling you right now, when we agree that it's 5 days, I will do it in 5 days. I will not do it any more time than that, as long as we agree up front. And I said, I wouldn't ask you to do anything other. And went back, and Joel said to me, so how'd it go? Billy, you got rid of him, right? And I went, no, he's doing it. You stupid motherfucker. You're an idiot. You're gonna pay for all the overages, because there are going to be plenty of overages. And, you know, I became really good friends with Billy thereafter. And he did it in 5 days, as he promised. And it was a great episode.
Suddenly our stock went up. And among the things that happened was that we got Universal suddenly ordered a couple of feature films.
Right.
The mandate is 3 different movies. Yeah, I think among the movies floating around, there was Demon Knight. There was something that Quentin Tarantino's movie was also floating around. There was the thing that ultimately became Dead Easy was floating around, but that was not anywhere near ready. And the next thing you know, suddenly the decision was made to do Demon Knight as the first movie.
Right.
Ernest did a fantastic job.
I do remember. There is a funny story though. I think we should tell. We're in. I think we're at the Van Nuys Airport, and we're all in trailers, and you and I have our trailer,
I remember.
and we're having a meeting with the art department, and they look at us and they go, "They're over budget," and I blew up. I smacked my hands down on the desk. I thought I broke my hand, and I just started screaming like Joel, and I walked out. I walked out of my own trailer. I was so pissed off. And I think I remember, I think it was you who came after me and he said, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, it was a few blocks away. And I said, yeah, I'm fine. Why? He goes, because everyone's back in your office. They can't believe you just walked out of your own meeting and you blew up like that. And they're all worried about
I remember this.
And I remember looking at you and saying, don't you recognize good acting or something to that effect?
Yeah.
No, we had great people on Tales. We had such a great crew. We had, our crew, if you remember, our crew changed every year by maybe 2% or 3%, only because someone got a job on a big movie. But our crew never moved anywhere because we were very fair with them. We treated them well. And they, in turn, treated us well. They did a great job. I mean, whether it was, Charlie Bartonelli Tommy Bellissimo on mechanical effects, or it was Kevin Yeager or Todd Masters, or later K&B on makeup effects.
Yeah.
Or Greg Melton. I mean, Greg Melton's job was insane because the world changed every 5 days.
Reinvent the wheel every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had really special people. We really had special people that were very dedicated. Our management, F.A. Miller, was a really special guy. I learned an awful lot from F.A.
Sure.
Yeah, he's no longer with us. I mean, we really had special people.
So we make Demon Knight. It gets good reviews. Makes just enough money that Universal greenlights Crypt movie number 2. Now remember, the mandate was 3 different movies. Demon Knight was a fun monster movie. We wanted film number 2 to be completely different. And had we made it, Dead Easy would have been a very different movie from Demon Knight. It would have been different from anything Gil and I had made before. We loved the challenge. Our whole crew did. And we were utterly convinced that not only were Gil and I and the executive producers and the creative team all on the same page, we thought our studio, Universal, was too.
Not only did we want to do it, everybody wanted us to do it, to the point where we took 5 people to New Orleans to scout locations with the art department, with the DP, you, me, maybe one other person after the DP and the art department. And we were looking and scouting locations when the phone call came, and the message was, stop looking at locations, don't spend any more money, come back home.
Some quick Hollywood history. At about this time, when all this was happening, Steven Spielberg, David Geffen, and Jeffrey Katzenberg formed a new company called DreamWorks. One of the first things DreamWorks did was begin making deals. Universal was terrified that another of its superstars, Bob Zemeckis, one of our executive producers, would leave Universal for DreamWorks because Spielberg was Bob's mentor. Universal, desperate to keep Bob in their stable, asked Bob what they could do to make him happy. Bob is an amazing collaborator, maybe the best ever, and he's an incredibly loyal man. He's always been good to his first writing partner, Bob Gale. Bob Z told Universal that one way they could keep him was by buying the first student script the two Bobs wrote while at USC Film School, Bordello of Blood. Universal agreed. They bought that script for $500,000, and Bob stayed at Universal. But Universal resented spending $500,000 on a script that was just going to go to waste. So they turned to us. We didn't know as we flew back what the bad news was going to be.
No, it didn't look good.
Something was up in the air. We didn't realize it was going to be us. Universal dropped the bomb. Dead Easy was dead. In its place, Universal told us we'd be making Bordello of Blood on the very same schedule. That meant we had just 3 weeks to 1, rewrite our boss's script without pissing him off, and 2, turn from prepping one movie in one place to prepping a completely different movie in a completely different place, which itself was turning into a question mark. Part 2. The Sad Ballad of Dead Easy. Also, how not to cast a movie starring Sylvester Stallone. Jerk. There's no telling what kind of movie Dead Easy would have been had we gotten to make it. And there's not a doubt in my mind that making it would have been a bear. But we wanted to make Dead Easy. We were deeply invested in it, while not a one of us gave a rat's ass about Bordello. As anyone who was lucky enough to work on Tales from the Crypt can tell you, doing that show, it was special. Really, really special. We were a tight, happy, creative team doing a show we all loved doing. And Dead Easy was, to all of us, the most natural extension of our creative team's creative evolution. Dead Easy was a story about found memory, about a man remembering his father and his childhood in New Orleans, and his father had gotten sucked into a voodoo curse. It was the kid's soul that was the price to be paid for the father to come back from the voodoo netherworld to which he had been cast, and getting back into this world. It was the price of the soul of his son, now a grown man.
It still sounds like a good idea.
We really saw it as a chance to stretch our creative legs.
Yeah, and also I think we thought it was a good story, and it was different enough, and from Demon Knight, and it was in the Tales from the Crypt world, and it felt like, wow, this is a great match.
It was a movie that could be written and directed. And you would see where really the craft of writing and the craft of directing were going to be required to pull off a successful story, a successful movie. Greg Melton was Crypt's production designer. He and Gil had been working together as far back as Freddy's Nightmares. Among Greg's credits since Crypt and Bordello are The Walking Dead and Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series. Greg's a really talented guy. But being a PD on an anthology series, that's not like anything else. There aren't any standing sets. The whole world is completely different every episode. And it's filled with completely different characters who must be reflected in those worlds. Great production design is all about attention to detail. Making that imaginary world real so that we can shoot it, that's the PD's responsibility.
I remember doing a lot of scouting, too. I was down there for like 3 weeks before you guys came down.
Right.
We were looking for like a lot of really tough stuff. Roads that drove through swamps, which really don't exist. We got all the way down to like Morgan City in our scout sweep down there. All the location scouting that we did inside of New Orleans. It was a big house, like a bayou house, I remember, that we had designed. Then there was like a whole other netherworld, conceptually wrap our heads around how do we
what the other side would look like in that brief interim where suddenly we're in that middle ground between here and there.
Right. And this is like, this is before, you could just wrap it in blue screen.
Yeah. No, everything had to be
really
practical.
Physically figure it all out as a physical environment.
There were lots of other benefits to shooting in New Orleans. Food, for instance.
The 5 of us went for Emerald's for dinner, and because of the film commission, he knew we were coming in and we were scouting. And so he actually came out of the kitchen and said to us, went around the room, what do you like? What do you like? What do you like? And we pretty much said, we like everything. And he said, well, if that's the case, will you allow me to make dinner? I'll just make dinner. Yeah. And we all said, yeah, oh, wow, that's fantastic, right?
Our location manager, I cannot remember her name. She was very well connected to the whole social structure.
Yes.
I don't know if Emerald had started his TV show yet.
I don't think he had.
In New Orleans, he
was a star.
And speaking of stars, while we never had the chance to cast our leads, we did begin reading and auditioning actors for the support roles. Victoria Burrows was Tales from the Crypt's casting guru. She still casts most of Bob Z's movies and Peter Jackson's movies, too. Victoria has an amazing eye for fresh talent, and she brought in an amazing fresh talent to read for Dead Easy. Salma Hayek.
Right. That was the most fun reading.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So Paul Weber was my assistant or associate on that.
Yes.
I remember us all sitting in the room, and Selma came in and he read with her, and he turns around to us when she leaves, because we were all gobsmacked at how great she was, and he goes, I'd go straight for her. It was like she just had it, it was like, oh my God, we have the cast.
It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Ms. Hayek walked in, felt our passion for Dead Easy, and simply went with it. It was that kind of project. It had every last ounce of our passion, of everyone on the creative team. It would have been easy to make. No, there would have been arguments galore. Absolutely. But it would have been arguments over something we cared deeply about.
I think I was in New Orleans when they pulled the plug, because I think I remember getting a call down there.
Yes. Come home.
Saying, come home. It's over. And I remember calling my agent going, they just shut down the movie. And he's like, well, don't worry, you've got a guarantee. So I was like, all right, I'll come home. I remember very quickly, it was just gone.
I had a conversation with Joel where, he was suggesting that this was before Demon Night. He was suggesting I do Demon Night. And I didn't want to do a horror. I didn't want to do just a goblin, a ghost in a house.
A monster movie, but it's a monster movie.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do that. I thought, we did Tales from the Crypt. That's close enough to monsters. I wanted to do something better and different, and other than that. So he said, okay, then you'll do the second one, because they want to do the first one. When we got to the second one, and I remember when we came back from New Orleans, I went in to see Joel, to say what's going on here, and where he explained a little bit of what was going on. And I said to him, but I want to do Dead Easy. And he said, and I'll never forget this, without even a thought or a beat in between, he said, okay, then we'll get somebody else to do Bordello of Blood, but that's the one that's going next. And I remember sitting there going, so I was going to do the first one. I decided not to do the first one. And now I'm doing the second one with a script that I really like, that you and I did. And now I'm not doing that. So do I say no and wait for the third one, another year and a half? Or not?
And that would hinge on the success of the second movie. And now it's a piece that is completely out of our control.
Yeah.
All right, if we walk back down the decision-making tree.
Yeah.
Universal's concern that Bob Zemeckis would make a deal with DreamWorks was very understandable. Their move to appeal to Bob, what can we do to keep you here in the fold? Understandable. Bob's reaction, okay, here's what would work, understandable. Bob, when he said, hey, something that one of the parts of the deal that could help make me stay is, buy the first student script that Gail and I ever wrote. I'm absolutely certain that when Bob said that, his intention was, and we'll make it as the second Tales from the Crypt movie. The thought never crossed his mind. These two things had nothing to do with each other.
Right. I don't think he ever thought that, nor did I think he thought that they would buy it.
This is a deal point.
Yeah.
That's what makes the whole story so maddening. It really comes down to a deal point. And then, hey, it's not hard to understand why Universal said, well, okay, we're not going to eat $500,000. There's a way for us to make this work in a business sense. They're being good business people. You can't question that. And hey, there's Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name on this script. That's Back to the Future guys. Their names on the script meant a hell of a lot more than your name or my name or Mr. Kelly's name.
Of course.
So if you look at it from Universal's point of view.
Oh no, I totally understand. I totally understand.
If we were all Greek, this would be a tragedy.
While Victoria Burrows began sending out scripts and reading actors, Gil, Greg Melton, our DP Robert Priestley, and I flew up to Vancouver to scout locations, find a home base to use as a studio, and find a Canadian production manager to oversee day-to-day set operations. In the middle of a run of bad luck, we scored some good. Universal hooked us up with an ambitious, smart production manager named Colleen Neistat. 30 years later, Colleen is a Vancouver city councillor. How lucky for Vancouver.
Ever since I received the email from you, I've been thinking about my movie business career and the highs and the lows. And there is no question that Bordello of Blood was one. If it was even possible to take off your resume, which of course IMDb makes impossible. If you're in the credits, you're recorded. Mind you, I had a different surname at the time, but it was a tough show.
In short order, Colleen found us a studio, 90,000 feet of abandoned GM parts factory, way more than we needed, including ample office and workshop space. She found us the glass church we wanted for the movie's climax, and she put together a pretty terrific crew. Vancouver today is a first-rate movie-making town, which makes it easy to forget that back when we made Bordello, it wasn't yet. That Vancouver was still a few years away from having the production chops it has now. Everything we needed to make Bordello was right in Los Angeles, just as it was for Demon Knight. Our crypt crew, they were in Los Angeles. Our special effects team was in Los Angeles. And IATSE, the union to which our crew belonged, they too were in Los Angeles. And Joel was perpetually at war with them. Sometimes Joel had the upper hand, sometimes the union did. Not too long before Bordello, the IA had struck the set of Weird World, a TV movie we did for Fox. After the union shut down that set, Joel began looking for payback. Bordello presented the perfect opportunity. Why did we shoot Bordello of Blood in Vancouver? To piss off the IA in Los Angeles. Literally. No other reason.
What are we gonna do now? I need something fresh and unique that people are gonna know about it. Oh, you're a fucking moron. What's wrong with you guys? What do I got? I got two schmucks.
It's impossible to compare Joel Silver to anyone else. He's what used to be called an impresario. At the time we made Bordello, Joel truly was a master showman who understood the movie world in a very particular way. His track record certainly spoke for itself. He made all the Lethal Weapon and Die Hard movies, just for starters. He'd go on to make the Matrix movies, the Predator movies, lots of great action movies. He understood how important it is to cast your movie just right. And that was why, though Gil and I had our own thoughts about casting, Joel took it upon himself as our more experienced executive producer to save us from ourselves and show us how to cast a feature film.
Well, we assumed we would have more involvement, shall I say, not even control, involvement in some of the huge decisions.
We could rewrite it to our heart's content, but the story was what the story was. A private detective in a small southern town becomes aware of the fact that a group of vampire prostitutes are operating in the basement of a local mortuary. That's it. That's the whole story. We did not have time to approach it from the logic point of view.
Well, no, because we were told that they had a release date about a year and a month later, and therefore, in their calculations, we had to be shooting in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't make the release date.
Yeah.
Basically, they told us we had 3 weeks to do the rewrite and then be ready to go into prep.
For the Rafe Goodman part, we had Danny Baldwin, what was who you and I had in mind.
Mhm.
I think for the female lead, I remember Bridget Wilson.
Yes, good memory.
Yeah, for the part that ultimately Erica Leniak got.
Yeah.
And for our villain, the most important piece in the horror movie, our Freddy Krueger, we wanted Robin Givens, is my memory.
Yes.
That was Gil's memory too.
By reputation, Robin might not have been the easiest person to work with, but I don't think that mattered. Hey, we worked for Joel Silver.
Correct.
It's difficult personalities were not a threat to us.
I tell people I specialize in difficult personalities.
Yeah, so I think had we, all right, given the fact that, hey, you're doing Bordello, like it or not, all right, if we had cast Danny Baldwin, if we had cast Robin Givens, all right, the female lead I think is more of a plug and play. I think we'd have had a great villain. Robin Givens would have given us, I don't know, I'd be willing to bet it would have been a terrific performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'd have gotten exactly what we wanted from Danny.
Yeah.
Joel, however, had other ideas.
He did indeed. I never found out like where those ideas came from, if Universal had anything to do with it, or it was just Joel.
Well, let's start at the top with Dennis. I know that wasn't Universal's idea, because when we told Universal what we wanted to pay Dennis, $1 million, when there was $250,000 in the budget, their attitude wasn't hooray. It was, hey, don't look at us, take that out of your budget.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we did. I can't imagine who in our audience, our Tales from the Crypt audience, would have gone,
Sure.
Dennis Miller. I understand the Angie decision, and we'll come to that.
Yeah. I do too.
I understand the Erica Eleniak decision. That was not a bad name for us, and we were not aware of the fact that she had, her life had changed to a degree. She wasn't
Yeah.
thinking quite the same way as in her earlier successful years, but she was gettable, and our audience would relate to her and liked her. So that was not a couldn't argue with that idea. That was a good idea.
Here's something either I didn't know or forgot about. Before we cast Angie to play our villain, another surprising name came up.
Marla Maples was in the mix,
Was she really? Oh my God, was she really?
and I,
Was she with Trump at that time?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
A quick digression. Hearing the name Marla Maples brought back the memory of another conversation, one Gil and I overheard while we were driving to Beverly Hills with Joel one afternoon in our early crypt years. That whole drive is a story unto itself. But as we went along, Joel took a call from Donald Trump. I don't remember what the point of the call was, but at the very end of it, Joel referenced the fact that Gil and I, Tales from the Crypt's producers, were in the car with him. "You should do an episode," said Joel. "I'd love to," said Trump. "Send me a script." Just for the record, we never sent him a script. And we didn't hire Marla Maples.
Erica fit it better.
When we suddenly went after Dennis, were you part of any of that negotiation, any part of that conversation? As our casting director, did you have to make the offer to Dennis?
I think Business Affairs did that because it was, a big, usually more than the.
So it never even touched us. It was all up above us.
It was hard to understand. Yeah.
And certainly to this day, we've never gotten the answer to that question. Why Dennis Miller? We're not going to find the answer here either, are we?
No, I chalked it up to there is maybe some, a lot of times there's promises to work together in the future and do other things. I can understand why Dennis Miller chose it, because it was a challenge. It was different for him. Didn't quite understand why.
I would say where Dennis is concerned, he took it because we offered him $1 million, which is $1 million more than anyone had offered him really to do anything.
Oh.
Where a feature film is concerned, not where his HBO show is concerned. No, he, master of that. But feature films, he'd done a couple of small parts.
Mm-hmm.
Not $1 million worth. Well, none of us thought that. Universal certainly didn't think that. They didn't pony up any breakage for that extra $750. We had $250 in the budget, and Universal said, "Well, he's nothing to us.
Yeah.
Take it out of your budget," which is what we did. We're $12 million, $750. Man, that came out of special effects. That took a couple of days. Literally, we took days off the schedule, days we needed. We took all that out of the budget to pay for an actor that, to this day, I don't know why we cast. Rosebud.
Yeah, exactly.
Rosebud. That's the explanation for why Dennis Miller. Okay, we'll move on from there because we're going to have to go burn a sled.
At the time we swapped out Dead Easy for Bordello with an eye to making it in Vancouver, Joel was producing another movie, a much bigger movie than ours in Seattle. Assassins, directed by Tales executive producer Dick Donner, starring Antonio Banderas and Sly Stallone, to whom Angie Everhart was engaged at the time. At some point, someone got the bright idea to connect these two movies. Now, I was not privy to any conversations, but whatever was said, my guess is it went something like this. "Hey, Joel, since you're going to be doing another movie in Vancouver, you should put my girlfriend Angie in it. That way she could visit during the weekends." That was how it was presented to us. On the surface, it almost sounds benign, doesn't it? Kind of romantic, even. The man's name is Sly, don't forget. He's a big movie star. He breathes different air than the rest of us. At least he thinks he does. The trouble starts when we don't disagree with them. But let's stick a pin in all the ulterior motives for the moment and go with the story we were given. A big star on one movie set asks his producer to do him a favor on another movie set. But that favor.
It wasn't really on its surface. Yes, it was an outside the box idea, but it wasn't entirely crazy in Joel's defense. But we were panicked, and understandably so.
Well, because it really felt like a reason to put, since we were making it in Vancouver and they were shooting Assassins in Seattle, that was a convenience that they wanted to offer to Stallone for his girlfriend so that she could come visit him on the weekends.
He had a movie that was unreleased at that point called Fair Game. Joel did.
Yeah.
And I think Joel might have thought that he was on the cusp of the next great trend in movies. Supermodels, big movies. And as far as he knew, Fair Game was going to open big. Cindy Crawford was going to, it was going to be huge.
Which it wasn't.
Yeah. And that happened after, I think
Yeah.
that happened after we were in production. Yeah, it might even happen while we were in production. It crossed our line too late for us to go, oh, wait, let's rethink that.
Yeah.
It was, the ship had sailed. There was nothing we could do. And we were about to be the second movie that did not, that was not going to succeed on the strength of its supermodel casting. Angie being really rather new and having never really the biggest, she played parts like the scene she played in Billy's Jade.
Yeah.
Good part, small part, but that's one thing. What we were going to ask this actress to do was something entirely different. Never mind outside her comfort zone. To be fair, outside her skill set at that moment, it's a huge ask, and not necessarily, not at all, a fair ask. We were putting the weight of this movie on her shoulders.
So we call our friend Billy Friedkin, who just worked with Angie in his feature film Jade.
Billy was, he said, she's good in what I had her do. What you are talking about probably might be outside
The box.
And that was the advice that Billy Friedkin,
Yeah.
Billy, the exorcist Friedkin, was giving to us about the casting of our horror movie.
Yeah, but you see, it was really more about making Stallone comfortable because Donner didn't want to have trouble with him on Assassins.
Of course. So here again, we weren't casting our movie to get the best possible actress. We were casting our movie because of a political decision on a whole other movie set.
We take one last shot. We propose a screen test. We figure that if Stallone sees the woman he loves on video not quite getting there as a movie villain, he'll do right by the woman he loves and pull the plug on this madness. And so we do a screen test with Angie. The problem, she walked into it having been directed by Stallone. It doesn't matter what she does or how the screen test plays, the fix is in. And just like that, our three leads were cast. Well, two were cast, Dennis and Angie. We were still out to Erica Eleniak to play our female lead. She, too, asked for more money than was in our budget for that role. It wasn't the $1 million Dennis demanded, but just like Dennis's salary, the overage would come off the budget. Remember what we said about smart producers making a buck look like $1.15? What do you do when your buck turns into 63 cents? But even after we agreed to pay Erica what she wanted, still, she wouldn't commit to the role. Dark clouds were looming over cloudless Vancouver. Geez, it sounds like a horror movie, doesn't it? And then, just like in a horror movie, the phone calls start coming from inside the house. Well, from inside Assassin's house.
As soon as she started working on our movie, they called our set and they said, hey, is there any way you could hold on to Angie for the weekends?
I remember this.
Because the point of the exercise of getting her onto the movie and then not having her in Seattle for the weekends was because he had something else going on.
Yeah. There was a lot of intrigue going on there without question, and not a lot of great communication. I remember the whole episode. I just don't recall specifically.
It was there in the air, can we say?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
So the call had come in, and it wasn't like a secret that we were keeping it in the office. Pretty much everyone in the production office, once that call came in, everyone knew and everyone was talking about it.
Yes, because if you remember, the production office was just the front office, and then we had, it had been the old GMC parts building, and we had sets and stuff built in the back. So what was going on in the production office was just the front of house. It spread throughout the whole of the crew.
Before too long, everyone on the Bordello of Blood set was aware of what was happening on the Assassins set.
Certainly with respect to their relationship, yes.
No one told Angie of our collective suspicions.
We didn't really have a close relationship with her in the beginning. I think there was a bit of, people were worried about getting too close because of that relationship. That changed over the course of the show. I think people really warmed to her over time.
A lovely person. That's what made it so hard to know something about her relationship that she didn't.
Yeah.
Part 3. Prepping for disaster. For the moment, Sly and Angie went back burner. On the front burner, though we'd found a few great locations, including the glass church the script called for, we weren't finding much of what we needed. Our movie took place in the American South, live oaks dripping with Spanish moss, something northerly Vancouver, Canada doesn't have much of. Production designer Greg Melton.
It still had a southern vibe to it, right? Bordello of Blood.
Yeah.
So you're trying to like hold on to that stuff, and there's nothing up there like that, So as I got into it, I realized that we're going to have to build a lot more than I thought. Like the bar, as I recall, there was a bar that we ended up building. I remember scouting, and we kept finding like pubs and things with cut glass, nothing that looked Southern, I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're building that too.
But nothing in the story really is Southern. It was set there, but there's nothing in the story that makes that any of that stuff mandatory. There's nothing organically Southern about
something
it.
to hang our hat on. You know what I mean? It's like let's pick a spot and at least try to pull it off. I mean, we all knew we wanted this old Southern mansion.
It's funny, we're having this conversation now. I don't think we ever had this conversation then. If you ask me, where is this taking place? Point to a spot on the map. I couldn't have done that then.
Yeah. As I recall, everything we did, we tried to make, I remember we were hanging moss in trees, weren't we? I mean, we were,
Yeah, we were trying to make it the movie we wanted to make.
Yeah. Oh,
how sad for us.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, it's 27 years ago. I thought that's what we were doing.
Who, aside from yourself in your department, did anyone else come up, or did
No, I had to put together an entire Canadian art department.
And at that point, that was still before Vancouver had become, it's always been a service town. It's not where anything originates, but it was still on the way to becoming.
Yeah, there was only a couple of shows at the time that we were there, not like the 20 or 30 that are there now.
Yeah.
Ed Tapio was Gil's assistant and so much more. These days, he's a producer in his own right. As we speak, he's producing All American Homecoming on the CW.
Yeah. And it wasn't deep. It was.
Yeah. Well, if you remember too, I don't know what the art department was like, Greg, but we had problem holding on to people in every single department. People would come in for 2 weeks and they'd leave for another show because we had 5 weeks left and they had 8 weeks left.
That's always the
constant
problem.
turnover.
I haven't been up to Canada in a long time, but I remember that always being the problem on any show, whether I was in Toronto or Vancouver or whatever. That's always a problem there, is people leaving.
Of course, loyalty is a two-way street. And did we really expect our Canadian crew to be more loyal to this project than we were? To be generous, Bordello wasn't a script where you could invest much in the characters. The Bob Z and Bob Gale who wrote Bordello, they weren't yet the two Bobs who would write Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. They were film students, and that's what they wrote like. Who the characters were inside their skins didn't matter, and 3 weeks wasn't going to give us enough time to make it matter.
I contemplated how we approached the rewriting of that script. There was really nowhere to go. Our natural inclination was to invest as deeply as we could in the characters, but there was no place to go with the characters there. There's the Rafe Goodman character, who is a small town private detective. All right. Reality, we got to remember, this was written by 2 college students with limited knowledge of reality. And so the reality is a a small town detective is not going to have a ton of work to do on a regular basis. What does he do with the rest of his time? You know, we certainly didn't invest, I don't think, a thought in wondering where he came from.
Right.
I don't think I ever thought for 2 seconds, all right, where was he born?
Yeah, what's his backstory?
Yeah, I know.
No.
The
No, there
only
was no-
backstory, the only backstory that we had time to worry about was the one that connected him in some fashion to Erica's character.
Right, exactly.
And
And that was a push.
oh my, a push of a boulder up the hill, and the boulder rolls down on your head.
Right. You know what I've really learned over all those years since, that the most enjoyable part of working on these shows was working with you in the writing.
Thank you.
And I really mean that, because, you know, the truth be told, you did more of the writing than I did. But the way we did it, I thought was very unique, because it was almost like, you know, two theater guys putting on a little play for each other in the room with Sophie the dog watching. And we would act things out, and we would explore and discover stuff by acting it out. And, you know, you would say, well, what about, and I'd go, yeah, but then what happens if he did that? Or, you know, we did that, and it was just, it was a no ego involved situation between the two of us. We both wanted to make the best script we possibly could. And the process I found to be so enjoyable that, you know, I used to often leave our sessions and go back to the real world, where I have to balance my checkbook and pick up dog food and realize how much I enjoyed being in this make-believe world, that it was all, nobody knew about it except it was in your head and in my head.
Oh, it's the best high imaginable. When you do it yourself and you go off into that creative place, it's one thing. But when suddenly you're doing it with someone else, it's the oddest experience, because you're both really transported to this other place that you couldn't tell you where it is, but it's as real and vital. And hey, when it really suddenly kicks in, you don't write the characters. They speak through you, and you're just doing the typing.
So the experience for me with the writing was exceptional, because I had you. I really mean that, because it was just a situation where it wasn't an effort or I had to go to work every day, or I had to go meet this guy to write something. I would be jumping up and down, can't wait to get there. Even though sometimes we'd get there and we would look at each other and go, oh, you know, do we really have to do this today? And okay, how are we going to figure this out? It's still, at the end of the day, was a place that was very unique from anything else I'd ever experienced, and was just a joy.
I honestly, in my mind, we were Lennon and McCartney. And, you know, the nature of that relationship, it's not, but really, truly, it wasn't like 50-50, everyone wrote 50%, 50%. No, that wasn't the nature. Influence really was, sometimes it was that proximity.
In feature films, the director is God, and the writer, if they're lucky, has a chair with their name on it, maybe spelled correctly, somewhere near the set. Jack Warner, one of the original Warner Brothers, famously referred to all writers as schmucks with Underwoods. Underwoods were typewriters. They preceded computers. Never mind. In TV, the power structure is the opposite of movies. With TV shows like Tales from the Crypt, the writer-producer is God, and the director is more like a traffic cop. That's why, though Gil had directed plenty of TV from the feature perspective, he was still a virgin.
I was on the plane coming back from New Orleans thinking, what am I going to do? You know, I really like this movie that we never made and that we were in New Orleans with. And I don't really remember. I didn't even know the script yet of Bordello. And, you know, what was I going to do? Now, I had turned down the first Tales from the Crypt movie. And if I figured if I turned down the second one, there may not be a third one. And if there is a third one, they might say, you know, screw you, you turned down the first two. So the question was, do I want to direct or not? And I thought, yeah, I'd like to give it a try. I'd like to see if I, you know, at the very least, I've always approached these things as making me a better producer.
Sure.
So I figured, okay, if I directed the movie, you know, I'll learn something from the experience that'll make me a better producer at the very least.
But you had directed 3 episodes of Crypt up to that point.
Yeah, I had directed Freddy's Nightmares. And I directed Tales from the Crypt. Yeah, and
I really enjoyed the process, and I really enjoyed working with the actors.
And the episodes were, all right, I'm kind of biased because we wrote them, but but really and truly, Death of Some Salesman is a great episode.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a daring outside the box episode.
Yeah, and What's Cooking, I think, was nominated for an ACE Award.
Yeah.
So we did well, and we thought maybe there's something here. And so on the plane coming back, I sort of decided through thick or through thin, I'm going to stay with this and do it. And so, and then it was just, the frustrations and the angst of the reality of what we had to do to get to that point with a script that we weren't totally committed to.
How did you approach directing it? I mean, at the end of the day, there would have been a thematic way to approach Dead Easy, because it would have demanded it. The nature of the material would have demanded a holistic approach to our creativity. I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. How the hell did you approach directing that movie with?
I think two things. I always approached, even when I did the early days in Freddy's Nightmares, and then ultimately in Tales from the Crypt, I always approached it from the point of view of first music. I always tried to figure out what's going to be the music for the piece, and that would help me with the rhythm and the tone. But when we did What's Cooking, and we had this idea of early Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And I remember I was really into early Louis Armstrong, and for some reason, I just kept hearing Louis Armstrong as we were shooting.
Blues.
Yeah, I just kept hearing that, and it certainly worked really well for that episode, I thought. So the music, going back to your question, the music was really the first thing that I think about or try to figure out, like, what am I hearing? What should it be? And then from that sort of establishes, okay, what's the rhythm? And then from that, sort of the tone was in the script, but it's also embellished by the music. So I really look at that. That's the first thing I look at. Then from that, I look at, okay, looking at the rhythm, what scenes are important for the rhythm of the piece to maintain itself, whether it's fast or slow. It's not a question of, okay, I need to tell this fast. Certain pieces you want to embellish, and you want them to grow, and you want them to, an audience to enjoy more than others. There are some scenes I think I call them connective tissue scenes, where, I gotta show you how he got from the car into the house, because you got to know, I can't just cut from the car. How to get into the house? I don't want to spend a lot of energy or time or money shooting that, but I got to have that. So I really approached it as a sort of a weighted average, and I would weight my time to what's important to the storytelling and what's this connective tissue kind of material. And I would say, okay, the connective tissue, I got to get it well, but I got to get it fast. And this other endemic to the storytelling, or to the characters, or to the relationship, or to the emotion of the characters, I got to give that more time. And that was really how I approached the shooting and how much time we would give to it.
Would you describe it as a theatrical approach?
I'm not sure I know what that means. I mean,
well,
from a theater point of view,
you were less concerned with how the scene looked than with how the scene played.
Oh, of course. To me, it's all about the emotionality of those characters and the relationship. We always tried to think of, where could you put the camera that no one else has put the camera?
Sure.
And of course, I would beat myself up for days. I think you experienced some of that with me. And where can I put the camera? And ultimately, you put it where you think it tells the best story and reveals the most about what you're trying to depict. But that was the hardest part for me, was creating the shots, because every shot that I would think of, I would say, there must be a better one.
With the clock running, the only character not officially cast yet was Catherine, Erica Leniak's part. We still had time. For our 4 key supporting roles, we cast 4 terrific actors, starting with, as our televangelist, Reverend Current, Chris Sarandon. Hey, Princess Bride. Great get. Phil Fondacaro as the televangelist's henchman.
Phil, he auditioned for us, and I thought he did a great job. And we both said, let's use this guy. He's great. He's a good actor.
Yeah.
And he did a great job.
We cast Corey Feldman as Catherine's brother Caleb, and Aubrey Morris as the mortuary owner. For the smaller roles, we hired Canadian actors.
Corey Feldman was kind of family.
Right.
But Corey, incredibly professional.
Corey was a real find, in my opinion, because, we first heard about Corey from Dick Donner.
And
Sure.
Dick, mentioned to us that he was sort of family and we should talk to him, we should consider him. And I remember meeting with Corey in LA and having a really candid conversation with him about it and saying, look, means a lot to me. It's the first time I feature and I don't want to have problems, on the screen and off the screen. I don't mind conversations. I don't mind conflict with you about character or interpretation or any of that stuff. That's all good. But I don't want to have issues with you because of outside influences. And at the time he was, I wasn't sure if he was in AA or not. And he just became delightful to work with.
Agree.
Sarandon was fantastic too.
Yeah.
I
Lovely
loved
man.
Yeah, I loved working with him. I really loved working with him.
We also brought up Aubrey Morris.
Well, I think Aubrey quite often. We became really good friends, and when he passed away, it was a real downer for us. Although he was, pretty up there in age.
Yeah.
But Aubrey was just one of these guys who had done a lot of stuff in England, had done a lot of horror in England. To me, he was a very recognizable face, and I just thought it was, very special that he wanted to do our movie.
It's funny. I became friendly with Aubrey as well, and we used to have lunch. And Aubrey told the most amazing stories. Now, hey, I was a drama major. I studied George Bernard Shaw, and Aubrey told me a story one day when he was at the Young Vic as a young actor, and he's doing Arms in the Man. And Shaw is in the audience one night, and Shaw comes backstage after the performance to tell him what a delight he was, and took him out and tried to get in his pants. Well, you gotta, first of all, Aubrey, before he was in our movie and he was in Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
And movie maven that I am, movie buff that I am, Clockwork Orange is just one of the huge movies. Now, in doing Tales from the Crypt, we got to work with Malcolm. Yes. We got to work with Malcolm, and that was a pleasure. He did a great episode, Reluctant Vampire, terrific episode. It is such an incredible thrill to work with the actors who are in the movies that mean so much to you. And Aubrey also plays a very terrific part in Clockwork Orange. He's Mr. Deltoid. He's little Alex, a parole officer.
Yeah.
And there's just he's great. He's over the top. It's funny. I met Aubrey in LA via a friend. We had a mutual friend, and we went to her little memorial service together and bumped into, I met him there, and we became friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was always calling me looking for a part, and so when the opportunity to cast him in Bordello came along, I was thrilled to put Aubrey's name forward and say, he should be the mortuary guy.
Yeah, he was great. He was a great choice.
Yeah. Oh, he's so creepy. 3 weeks have now sped by. We're wary of a few potential weaknesses.
Oddly enough, I wasn't worried about the relationship with the crew, because I felt we had gotten some really good people to be, to work with us. So it wasn't a question of, okay, will we be ready? Although it's always a problem on a daily basis, not on an overall, okay, we've got 3 weeks. Well, we used to take 5 days to prep a half hour of Tales from the Crypt. So part of me thought, well, it's like 3 Tales from the Crypt. We have 3 weeks, then we shoot. And also, we don't have to reveal and know everything in the first day of shooting, because we're continuing, for the next few weeks to shoot, and we can find things along the way. Not as easy to do because you can't prep it and you can't figure out the shots as easily, but it's doable. So I was worried about just about everything.
Were you worried about special effects and makeup?
I'm always worried about special effects and makeup because, if the special effects and makeup don't work really well, then people are pulled out of the movie. Once they're pulled out of the movie, in my opinion, it's over. You've lost them. So I really needed to make sure that they were done very well. And we used the guy on Tales from the Crypt a lot,
named Todd Masters. And, we used him again on this movie.
We didn't start with Todd.
No, we didn't, but we wound up with Todd.
We wound up with Todd. We gave the job to local talent.
Yes. That didn't work out so well.
Our small Canadian effects team brought everything they had to the table. Problem was, we were asking for more than they could do at the time. We were setting everyone up for failure. Yet, as principal photography finally began on a Thursday, we felt a kind of hopefulness, the kind one always feels at the start of something.
I don't know of anyone else who does this, but you've always liked to start shooting, whether a TV show or a feature film, on a Thursday, if you
on a Thursday
possibly can. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a reason to my madness. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought a lot about it because most people start on Monday.
Yeah.
And I always felt, well, Monday, you don't get till the weekend for 5 days to regroup. What happens if we started on a Thursday and we had the opportunity to work for 2 days and we could see if the crew is working out, or maybe we need to talk to somebody, or maybe we need to replace somebody. And after 2 days, we could get a better sense of how the shooting is going, and maybe we need to make an adjustment to the script. And so you can use the weekend to make a lot of adjustments. Plus, psychologically, I've always felt that after you work for the 2 days and had the 2 days off for that weekend, when you came back on Monday, something gelled, and the crew was your crew, and they were on this movie, and it wasn't just another, whatever. Now, maybe that was a little, silly of me, but on the other hand, I did feel like, by Monday we were a group, and we weren't looking to find ourselves. We did that on Thursday and Friday.
In a way, it's weird. The weekend played a funny joke on one's mind. It made the relationship feel longer.
Yeah.
Because you'd already been through a weekend. So, hey, I guess we must have worked all week, didn't we?
Right. And so when you come back on Monday, people know people's names. It's not the first day of shooting, so it's not like you're groping for names and you're groping for what's happening. It's sort of, for me, it always shortcut the cohesion.
Everything seemed copacetic the first 2 days.
Yeah, we should have stopped right then.
We were actually kind of upbeat at that point. I think we thought, oh well, we'll muddle through. We'll make the best of not the happiest situations, but we didn't have Erica in hand yet, but we had Dennis, and hey, okay, we were committed to it. We had Angie, and what the hell. And we were making a movie, and Vancouver was lovely. It was nice being there, and we were making a movie, and so the whole world seemed to feel right.
Okay, yeah,
right enough anyway. And then the weekend came. There's a picture that I have. One of our wives took it. We went out on the Saturday for brunch, the four of us, you, Jeanette, me, Helen. And as soon as we sat down, your phone rang, then my phone rang, the big, massive cell phones up to our heads,
right.
Sure, irradiating our brains.
Right.
And I don't know what fire you were putting out, but I was putting out we got to get Erica Eleniak on a plane tomorrow, Sunday, to be in wardrobe Monday to work on Tuesday.
Right.
And her manager, whose name I can't remember, I'll have to ask Victoria. Her manager was telling me that there was a problem, that Erica had big issues with the script, and she was not going to get on an airplane unless we committed to making significant changes to the script.
Correct.
She didn't want to play hookers or
sexy lady. She didn't want to be a sexy lady.
Yeah, she wanted to be more of an actress. For some reason, the title page on the script we sent her said Hamlet. I don't know why we did that.
Yeah.
And so she said yes to Hamlet, and then we said, oh, we're just kidding. It's called Bordello of Blood. That must be what happened.
Really?
Her manager insisted that her concern, the originally as written, this little church secretary had a secret past. She had been a porn star named Chesty O'Toole. God, it hurt to say.
It's kind of painful. It's kind of painful going back through this,
Boy, it actually hurt to say that. Oh, God. Yes, and she did not want to play. Initially, she did not want her character to be a former porn star. Well, that was going to be a problem because the script is written. That was her connection to Dennis's character. That's how he was going to know her. If we take this away, what are we going to do to accommodate that? And hey, we've already, we had a movie theater. An empty movie theater in the worst part of Vancouver, an empty movie theater that we were using as his office.
Mhm.
And the whole premise, this was already happening. The whole premise was, of course, that he was into porno. And she, Chesty O'Toole, was his favorite porno actress. If you take that away, what are we going to do?
Then you have Hamlet.
What does she do? What does she sell him? She sells him insurance? In the end, what her manager agreed to was that she had been a large woman, and she had been an overweight porn star named Chubby O'Toole, or
Yeah, I think it was Chubby. I think it
no,
was.
Chubby O'Toole. So, and she, of course, now she was unrecognizable because she had slimmed down.
Right.
And this is what we agreed to. Now, of course, at this point, I will agree to anything to get her on an airplane.
Right.
Anything, because literally the man has us over a barrel. There's nothing we can do. That is the fire that I put out. And that created a whole other set of nightmare scenarios, because that can how to get, the script was now going to get rewritten on Sunday because this was going to ripple all the way through the script. And
Right.
of course, we were going to have to introduce Dennis to the idea that his character,
Chubby Hubby. Now you like Chubby.
what we were going to hand the man in that script the next day was becoming ludicrous.
Well, the
Right.
fire, if I recall correctly, the fire that I was putting out
Thank you. Please.
was I was on the phone with Joel, and he said to me, "You got to call Dennis because Dennis needs to talk to you, and he has a lot of concerns and demands, and you need to agree to the demands." I said, "What demands?" He goes, "Well, I'll let Dennis tell you." Now, I think Joel had already heard the demands, and I don't think he wanted to tell me. But be that as it may, I get on the phone with Dennis. And Dennis is saying to me stuff like, "Well, first of all, I only work an 8-hour day. I don't work longer than 8 hours." And I said, no, Dennis, we're making a movie here. Everybody works at least a 12-hour
We're
day.
paying you $1 million.
Oh,
We're paying you $1 million.
wait a minute.
That was not in your contract, son, that you only have to work 8 hours a day for your $1 million bucks.
So that was the first thing. That was the problem that I wouldn't agree to it. Then the second problem was he needed a private jet to bring him back and forth because he was doing his show on HBO Friday night. So we needed to provide him with a private jet to take him, and he would only work a half a day on Friday and take him down for his show. And then we'll bring him back, not on over the weekend or Sunday, but the jet wouldn't leave until Monday morning. So we couldn't get him on the set, which was starting at 6 or 7 in the morning. He wouldn't be able to join us till 12 or 1, which I didn't agree to. Then he wanted his own makeup person, his own hair person, which I didn't agree to. And I mean, that was the conversation. When I called Joel back saying, "I don't think this is going to work," he would say stuff like, "Oh no, it's got to work. We got Dennis. Dennis is doing the movie. You got to figure this out."
The weekend comes to an end. The script gets rewritten and distributed. Erica Leniak is playing
Chubby.
church secretary who used to be Chubby O'Toole. We're on location at the Orange.
The number 5 Orange, to be exact, still in business.
I remember sitting out in the parking lot where craft services and we were feeding people and the trailers were, and Dennis arrives and we meet Dennis for the first time. What were your first impressions of Dennis?
Well, after the conversation that I had with him
Yeah.
on the weekend, I had my dukes up. I was ready to do battle. I was very defensive. Nothing had been resolved except his money. And I didn't have any say in that. That was the
Fait accompli.
Yeah. So I still had no idea about the plane. But more importantly, I didn't really care so much about the plane, except for who's going to pay for it. But I was concerned about the amount of time that I had to work with him because he was in almost every scene. And so to say he's going to leave half a day on Friday and leave half a day on Monday and only work an 8-hour day, there's no way that I could do it.
You even board that.
Right. So I guess I went into that first day with Dennis
very defensive and really upset and not sure how I was going to deal with it. How would it all work its way out? So it wasn't the best way to start a movie.
When you first met him face to face, was it contentious?
I don't really recall all that. I just remember I was very defensive because of what happened over the weekend. And I was waiting for more battle about that. And I think he basically left that. And I don't think our initial conversations, once he came to the set and once he got up to Vancouver, were about that. I think we talked a little bit about wardrobe. I think we talked about how he doesn't like makeup. He doesn't want to use makeup. And I said, I don't want you to use makeup. I want you to do some. I want you to look good on camera. So that's the kind of makeup I want for you. I don't want you to be made up in any way. And I guess he was sort of agreeable to that because he could control that once he got into the chair.
Sure. Hey, Joel Grey Cabaret. That's what we're thinking, dude.
Yeah, right.
When I met Dennis the first time, we actually hit it off okay in an interpersonal way. He made a joke. He referenced, Dennis, part of his comedy stylings is just obtuse, obscure reference.
Yeah.
And he referenced a character actor named Burt Remsen.
Mhm.
And I knew who that was. I responded as if I got his reference. And Dennis looked at me and he said, Catsy. All right, Catsy, which became my name from then on. I was just Catsy. And I handed Dennis the script. I said, all right, cool. Hey, I felt like, hey, maybe this is going to work out. Maybe this relationship could go places. Hey, maybe this is going to work out after all. And I hand him the script and he opens it and he looks at the first line of dialogue that's written for him. And he says, I can't say that. If you look at the line, well, it wasn't written really for Dennis. We really didn't write it with Dennis in mind. We were just trying to write it to make the damn story work. It was hard to fill Rafe's character with lots of pithy dialogue because who was he? As a character, he didn't make any sense. It's not like you could write. His character had nothing to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of reflected on the page. So when your actor says, well, I am saying that, it's not like I'm going to go rush to the dialogue's defense and say, damn you've got to say every word in this script. I'm G.B. Shaw, don't you understand?
Yeah, it was more like, what do you have in mind?
when the first thing that your lead actor says is, I'm not saying a word that you've written. And I know that he looks at the script as being poorly written. And it's not like we can argue because we can't point to the script and go, it's gems, man. It's gold, because it wasn't. And so
we should have introduced him to Erica because then she could have convinced him that it was Hamlet.
Hey, there you go. And somewhere it would have fallen somewhere between the two.
Right.
And so Dennis, he said there, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to improvise all my dialogue is what he said. There was no way to say no. Right off the bat, we kind of lost Dennis.
Yeah, he was only doing it for the $1 million.
Because Joel said yes to the $1 million.
Yeah.
If Joel had gone, are you out of your mind?
Right.
No one's paying you $1 million to do anything. We would have moved on from Dennis.
Yeah.
But it was saying yes to that demand. And I'm sure Dennis said, give me $1 million, figuring no one in their right mind would say yes.
Correct.
And yet there we were.
If only meeting Dennis had been the day's one challenge. As Dennis headed to the hotel, someone else was planning to visit our set.
Did you know Joel was coming that day? Let's start there.
Well, I guess the true answer is no. I had no idea that he was coming, but it was probably my own fault that he came because I kept saying to him, Joel, I don't understand. You're in Seattle with Stallone and Dick Donner. Dick Donner is an established director. I'm not. This is my first movie. Yet you choose to be in Washington, in Seattle, with Stallone. I can't believe that. And with Donner. He goes, what are you talking about? You've directed Tales from the Crypt and you've directed this, and I trust you and you know what you're doing. And I know, Joel, but it would mean a lot to me if you can, you come up here. He goes, okay, I'll come up. I'll get there. And I'll go, yeah, when are you going to get there? You'll always have an excuse not to get here. I think you should come up. I think it would mean a lot to me if you came up. I think it would mean a lot to see you on the set and for the crew, for the cast and everybody.
Really?
Yeah. And I really wanted him to come up
my
so I could
God.
but I really wanted him to come up so I could have a conversation with him about replacing Dennis.
I did not know that.
That's what I really wanted. because this was the first day, right?
Did you have did you have something in your pocket in terms of who we would, now that we're shooting?
Not, I think I did then, but I can't remember who it might have been. And it probably was somebody that it was in the family. It was either someone who did Tales with us or someone that had worked with Joel, somebody that we could call home.
Sure. Yeah, there were plenty of people who certainly would have been as good, if not better than Dennis.
Yeah. So I'm shooting, I'm working, and I figured it fell on deaf ears. And now we're shooting on first day. The phone rings, and they tell me it's Joel, and I go, tell him I can't talk to him. I'm directing a movie. So they hang up, and 5 minutes later, the phone rings. It's Joel. He's got to talk to you. So I go, okay. I go, Joel, I'm directing a movie. I can't really talk to you while I'm directing a movie. Does Dick, you're standing there, so in between shots, he can talk to you. I'm a first-time director. I don't have the time or the inclination. I gotta concentrate on what I'm doing. What do you want? And he goes, I just want to tell you, I'm coming to visit. When? Today. Today? What do you mean today? I'm coming up to see you today, but there's a problem. I said, what's the problem? I've left. I'm on the plane already. I don't have my passport. I go, well, Joel, then turn around and come tomorrow, because you can't cross the border without a passport. You can't get into any country without a passport. He goes, no. You need to call Canada and tell them I'm coming and tell them to let me in.
I seriously remember Gil handing me the cell phone, covering it like this and saying, Joel says we have to call Canada. Who in Canada are we supposed to call?
I mean, I was like, well, I mean,
these moments.
He said, Gil, you told me, who in Canada are we supposed to call? And then you got back on the phone.
Right. And so I go, Joel, there's no Canada to call. There's nobody. There's no Canada. There's immigration. Immigration won't let you into the country. It's really that simple. Just go back, get your passport, and come tomorrow or in a few days. No. I'm already in the air. I'm on my way. I'll be landing in about 25 minutes. Just call Canada and tell them to let me in. I go, and again, I say the same thing. And he goes, well, if they don't let me in, I'm going to pull the movie. Tell them I'm spending millions of dollars on this production. And if they don't let me in, I'm going to pull the movie out of there. And I go, Joel, they don't care about our movie. They don't care how much we're spending or how much we're not spending. They're there to protect the borders. They represent the country. I said, look, I can't take care. I can't call anybody. I'm busy shooting. I can't do this. And I think we hung up.
And then he called me and did the same thing with me that he had just said with you, literally the exact same stuff.
Oh, yeah, it didn't work with him. Maybe it'll work with you.
And I went back to the office, and somehow Colleen had found out. And at that point, Colleen is almost running down the hallway saying, Joel Silver's coming. Joel Silver's coming. We don't have any grape Snapple.
Grape Snapple?
Because somebody had told her that he'd always insisted on having grape Snapple.
I'm sure glad that didn't make its way to the set.
Is that true? I didn't. Was Joel a grape Snapple guy?
Oh my God! In London, you don't remember? In London, I sent Glenn out for a day and a half to find grape Snapple before Joel showed up, and he couldn't find it. He was gone a day and a half, and he finally found it, like in East London somewhere, and brought back the whole case.
I have.
Glenn loves telling that story because he finally found it at a train, one of those little bodegas they have at the train stations.
Yeah.
And he goes, you have grape Snapple? And the guy said, yeah, how much you want? And Glenn said, all of it.
When he arrived at Vancouver Airport without any identification, he didn't even have a driver's license.
Right, nothing.
And the pajama, our first AD on Bordello was named Lee Knipperberg. And Lee's nickname for Joel was the Pajamanator. Or because he was Canadian, he said the Pajamanator. So now Joel lands at the Vancouver International Airport in a private plane, because he didn't
not the one that he was supposed to be, not the one that we had the information on the travel memo and that we'd assigned the driver to.
Okay, so he's changed. He's landing on a different plane than we expect. He lands at the airport, and when he approaches Canadian customs, they say papers. And his response is, "Don't you know who I am?" To which,
well, he didn't even have a driver's license.
No,
he didn't have anything.
Nothing.
And so I get the call, and because I deal with the border regularly as part of the job, and anyhow, the punchline was he made their lives a living hell, and they just asked me, Colleen, will you vouch for him? And that's how we got him into the country.
Wow. I don't think I ever knew that.
Yeah, it was Colleen did that entirely on her say-so that she got Joel into the country. And so Joel gets into the van, and there was a plan. We wanted to show the boss what we were doing. And so the first stop wasn't location, it was to show him our great production facility. And from the moment he got out of the van, he was a pit bull on a tear.
Nothing was good enough. He had nothing was good enough. Everything was bad. He even hated the fact that my production company was called New City Productions, and it had a sign which was actually the skyline of Vancouver was the logo, and he was like, tear that down. Do this. He just walked through like a wrecking ball through and that was a big place. I've been prepared to take him for a walk around the studio. We had about 90,000 square feet, as you recall, and we had sets built all over it. And so, my original plan was when the executive producer arrives, we'll give him the tour of the facilities and go through the whole spiel. But he just was in full on. You might have prepared us.
I got a call from my assistant, and she said, you better get over here right now. Everyone's quitting. And I went there, and Joel went through there like the Tasmanian devil. And our entire production staff were female, and he had and Canadian, so they're really nice people on top of that. And Joel, literally, there were some of our staff who were literally in the parking lot about to get into their cars when I got there, and I begged them to stay. And they were crazy enough to listen to me, and they stayed. I don't know what I promised them, that in no way could I deliver, but they stayed. And and then when I finally got to location, Joel was there, and he was hanging with you, and it was like nothing happened.
Well, it wasn't like nothing happened. He when he came onto the set, he was like, he was ready to give it to me too.
Oh,
and
sure,
he did.
sure.
And he did. And we had a bit of a to-do, actually in front of everybody, which I don't like doing. But I wasn't gonna let him roll over me.
But what I mean, it didn't mean anything to him that he had just really, he had really hurt the morale of our office. Our support staff went from whatever they thought of us before that moment, the whole way they thought of us changed in that moment.
Yeah.
Because of the way that Joel blew through there.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much we could do to
fix it.
Yeah. And it was, yes. And it was a remarkable experience, but that was day 3 of our shoot. And we got to the end of it, and it was exhausting. And Joel had changed the whole crew didn't look at us quite the same way anymore. In fact, the crew was already angry at us because Dennis's schedule was going to make us flop our weekends. We were going to flip our weekends from because Dennis rehearsed on Thursday, shot on Friday. So that became our weekend, and our Monday was Saturday. And our Canadian crew, that's not the deal they made.
Yeah.
And it was Colleen went to the mattresses for, she put her reputation on the line and said, look, do this for me. Because that's not the deal her crew made. Americans, we live to work. They work to live.
Yeah.
So by the time Dennis arrived, and by the time Joel arrived on our set, strangely, all the good feelings from the weekend on Friday, by the time I got to Saturday, it was already a mess.
Part 4. Special Effects. On Tales from the Crypt, we had production designer Greg Melton to imagine for us what the Crypt world looked like. To imagine the special makeup effects that were so essential to Crypt world, we had special effects master Todd Masters. But while we brought Greg North with us, because our budget was cut to accommodate casting Dennis Miller, wanting $1 million to be in our movie, even though we didn't want him, we couldn't afford to bring both Greg and Todd Masters with us. And so, We left Todd back in Los Angeles. We held our breath and took our chances with a small, local special effects team led by a very talented, but at that point, inexperienced special effects artist named Chris Nelson. Chris really is a first-rate special effects guy and occasionally an actor. He's in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill 2. He plays Tommy Plimpton, the bride's Uma Thurman's husband-to-be, before Bill massacres the whole wedding. He's very good. Where were we? Oh, right. The first challenge was a mechanical tongue gag. Vampire Angie swaps spit with a Bordello patron, but the kiss suddenly turns horrifying when Angie's tongue slides all the way down the guy's throat and then bursts out through his chest. Yeah, gruesome, but hilarious. And we needed it to be more than just good.
You have to trust that whoever you're going to use to do X, Y, or Z does it really well, especially when you get to effects. And I thought we felt he did it okay. It came off okay. But we didn't go into this knowing that it was going to be okay. And we can't really afford for this, and then especially the ending, not to be okay. And of course, Todd had always delivered for us on the series.
Really?
And so we felt more comfortable, saying, let's get Todd here.
Some movie sets are a total pleasure to be on. There's a cohesiveness, a sense of family. It's us against the world. No such feeling ever overwhelmed the Bordello of Blood set. While some of the cast commingled and hung out together, our leads pretty much kept to themselves. Dennis kept to Dennis, Erica kept to Erica, and Angie kept to Sly. But then our production office in Vancouver began to get calls from the Assassins production office in Seattle asking us if there was some way to hold Angie for the weekends. Hold her to do what, we wanted to know. Study her lines? Do her homework? What were we supposed to be here, her mom? Can't help you there is what we told the Assassins set, and we tried to pretend we hadn't heard what we'd clearly heard. At the same time, an issue larger even than Sly and Angie began to loom over us. Dennis.
Once we got rolling, what was happening?
Well, I sort of, put all that stuff aside, the problems with him and everything, and I basically tried to approach it one-on-one as a director to an actor, trying to make a movie, trying to make a scene, trying to make a shot, and dealt with him in that way. And then when he would bring up, hey, I need to go, and I would say, no, we're finishing this. And then sometimes he would let it go, and sometimes we would get into it. It was very painful. As I said, when we first started talking about maybe even doing this, I don't know if I want to do this because, most of the recollection of making this was very painful until you pointed out that there were some very funny things, which I had to agree with you. But it was a very painful process for me. He was probably the cause of the main amount of pain, although others participated as well.
Who comes to mind?
Erica.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Stallone's girlfriend.
Angie.
The other actors I thought were fantastic.
We cast them.
Yeah, and we had conversations before we cast them. Even when Dick Donner suggested, how about talking to
Corey Feldman.
We had made an episode with Corey. Again, at Dick asking. He didn't tell us. He asked.
Yes.
We did that. And then, I had a conversation with Corey before we did the show, before we hired him. And he was gung-ho. He was on board. He wanted to participate. He wanted to do the best he could do. And he was great, as was the priest, Chris Sarandon. Couldn't have been better. He was a delight to work with. And we had Aubrey Morris, who was the delight of delights to work with.
Indeed.
So we did have some moments where we had fun and some great give and take with the actors. But those three made life very difficult. And unfortunately, they were in most of the scenes.
Dennis was challenging because he didn't really want to be there.
Well, he wasn't often there mentally. I don't care if he wanted to be there. I didn't really care if he wanted to be there or not. I knew that. My job was to get a performance out of him regardless. I would often push him. Let's make this adjustment. Let's do another one. I never would say to him, let's just do another one, because he would then challenge that decision, which he shouldn't have challenged, but he would. And I would always say, that was much better. I want it this way, and I want you to turn that way, or I just need a little bit more of a whatever. And then he would do it. But if I just said, okay, let's do another one, no.
Actors improvising their dialogue is not a new thing. Hey, I'm a Groucho Marx fan, and there's a very famous story about Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright George S. Kaufman standing backstage when Animal Crackers, the Marx Brothers' second film, was still on Broadway. Groucho, Chico, and Harpo were famous for tossing the script entirely and making it all up as they went along, something the Marx Brothers writers, they didn't appreciate. So, one day, backstage at Animal Crackers, a friend is telling George S. Kaufman a story when Kaufman shushes him. Wait, he says, I think I just heard one of the original lines. With Dennis, no such thing happened. One of the most important jobs on any movie set is script supervisor. On Bordello, we had a very good script supervisor named Laura Fox.
I always tell people that I'm the eyes of the camera. Whatever the camera records, I have to record it on paper for the editors so that they can edit it in, because film is shot in pieces and it's not shot continuously. So there has to be a paper trail. I have to watch the eye line that the actors are looking the right way. They can't all be looking in the same direction, because if they go to cut, it won't make any sense that people be talking off screen.
Yeah. And I'm sure most of the audience has no idea how critical eye line is just to the internal logic of a scene.
Oh, I know. And on that, on Bordello of Blood, excuse me, I had a lot of trouble with what's his name, Tom Priestley. He wouldn't listen to me about crossing the axis, and we were in the mortuary, and it was pretty tense. And I went in to tell him that he had crossed the axis, which was on a very important piece of dialogue. And he turned to me and he said, "Go home and watch TV." And I was so angry.
Oh,
I said,
dear.
"Yes, that's exactly where I'm going." And I turned around, walked off the set, grabbed my chair and script, and headed for the parking lot. Poor Gil and the AD came running after me and saying, please, don't leave. And I said to Gil, "I will come back as long as I don't have to talk to him. I will tell you everything, and you can relay the message." And he said, "Great."
I do remember occasionally while we were shooting, I would even look into the monitor and say to Tom, should I adjust the eye line to the left or to the right a little bit? I don't remember the specific about running after her, but I probably did. I mean, if she said we did, we probably did. Script supervisors historically, need to make their presence known in a very special way, in a very quiet way, to both the DP and the first and to the director, so that they can judiciously decide, oh, yeah, we should change this, or no, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to fix it in the cut. No, it's not affecting us because. And so over the years, the one thing I've noticed is with script, and I've been very fortunate, I've been able to get script supervisors that I had a great relationship with in the interview. And we actually talk specifically about how we talk to each other when things have to be said to each other that may not be terribly pleasing to one or the other. I said, that's historically the nature of the script supervisor. You're saying to me, this is wrong. And I'm saying, hey, either it doesn't matter, or I know, but it's okay, or, oh, whoops, I got to change. Thank you. So it's very likely that we did run out after her, because I didn't want to, I was frightened enough directing the movie. I didn't want to start thinking about, oh my God, I now have to be the script supervisor as well.
The script supervisor's job is complicated, fiddly, and multitasking intensive to begin with. And now into the mix, Laura had to keep track of every one of Dennis's improvs. If I improv hello one take and goodbye the next, they're not going to cut together. And what are the other actors supposed to do when their lines stop making organic sense?
Well, I tried to write as much down as I possibly could, but because timing the scene and watching the action and trying to write the ad-lib dialogue down, it was very difficult.
She had experience actually with an actor notorious for improvising. She had done Jumanji with Robin Williams.
Right.
And she made an interesting observation, the statement.
The way with Robin Williams, he would give the director the script, and then would ask, can I do my versions? And so I had a tape recorder that I had attached to my headset, and I recorded all his dialogue for the subsequent scenes that he like the master scene.
Right. This was on Jumanji. So you had experience with working with an actor very well known. I mean, Robin Williams was. I mean, improv was that was where all his genius lay.
Yeah. Well, I was warned about that, and that's why I got this little portable tape recorder I put on my belt. And then, but the thing with Robin was, once he said in the scene that he was improving, when we went to close-ups, he was letter perfect.
Doing the same improv?
Yes.
Wow.
From the master to the close-ups, he was letter perfect, because I started typing it out because I typed my notes at the end when we were lighting.
Sure.
And his close-up dialogue matched the master perfectly.
We obviously made the wrong move. We should have gotten Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, you know. So the problem with Dennis is that it was different each and every time, which of course made cutting anything together really hard.
And he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember what he did in the previous take.
No, and Laura, you know, would be furiously dribbling what she could remember of him saying. Hey, she's also got to be timing the scene. She's going to be looking over here, looking over there. She really does not have time to be trying to remember what Dennis is adding or subtracting from our script.
Yeah.
Erica.
Well, what can I say? I mean, Erica should never have accepted the role. She didn't want to be what the part called for. She had a very strange analysis of her own self at the time. She was a Playboy centerfold, but didn't want to do nudity, didn't even want to do anything suggestive. It's like she became, you know, the church lady. She did the movie for all the wrong reasons, because she wasn't thinking about the performance. She was thinking about everything else.
It was a good payday for her. We paid her more than we had in the budget.
Yeah, but I mean, she once said to me, we were setting a shot, and I think she said to me, "Is the camera looking up my skirt?" I looked at the monitor and I said, "Absolutely not." Said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "No, I want you to be sure. Come here. I'm going to go sit in a chair. I'm going to sit in a chair the way you were sitting. Can you see anything like if I had a skirt on?" "Well, it's different." And she looked, and then she came off. "Well, it's different. I can't tell." I said, "Well, I can. And I'm telling you, I'm not interested in that. I don't want that in my movie. And we're not doing that." And then she was okay for that moment for me to get the shot. But that's what we were dealing with.
Having been exploited, having suddenly realized, when you realize that you've been exploited, that's got to be horrific. How you thought about yourself suddenly, is a problem, and how you're thinking about yourself is now in crisis and transition, and how are you going to think about yourself tomorrow?
Yeah, but that's okay. Then don't do the job. Don't take on the role that you read and you said you'll do it, and then the first thing you say is, "I won't do it."
Yeah, I want to give the benefit of the doubt, but then you took a gig with a movie called Bordello of Blood.
Right.
Come on. Everyone's got to be a little responsible for their own shit.
Right.
All right.
Angie tried to be a team player. Angie tried to be, because she wanted to be an actress in her own right.
Surely.
And she wanted to convince us that she could do that, and she would do that. But then what happened was, she would go visit Stallone every weekend in Seattle, and she would come back on Monday, and most of Monday I would have to spend trying to undo what she had rehearsed with Stallone, because she sounded a little bit like Rocky. All of a sudden she had a Brooklyn accent. Most of Monday I would have to say, no. Let's go back. That's not your character. Yeah, but this is how I rehearsed it with Stallone.
I have a memory, once Dennis began improvising, and I'm sure that got to Seattle before the trips to Seattle stopped, she would come back with some new dialogue. If Dennis doesn't have to worry about the script, why do I have to worry about the script?
We started off, she was a sweetheart. We started off, she, was very responsive to direction, and, we had conversations and discussions, and she understood what I was saying, and I understood what she was saying. And then we would come up with, how to resolve it so that it worked for both of us. It was great. And then when she started making the trips to Seattle, it became much more confrontational. And I'll never forget, there was one, you may remember this as well. We were, the trailer, I forgot where the trailers were,
But her trailer was like on the other side of a little park where our trailer was. And I was outside my trailer, and I could see she was outside her trailer and she was on the phone. And it was very an animated phone conversation. And then she hung up and went into her trailer. And then about 5 minutes later or less, my phone rang, and it was Joel. And Joel was giving me, a lot of shit about Angie. And I said, wait a second, you just were on the phone with her, weren't you? You just got off the phone with her, didn't you? And he said, no. I said, no, you're lying. You're full of shit. I just watched her, very animated, talking to somebody, and it had to be you. And, I knew it. She had called him to complain about me. And, I just listened to Joel, and I basically told him to go fuck himself. I said, I'm directing a movie. You're not here. You're my producer, supposedly absentee because Donner needs you so terribly much in Seattle. Okay. So I will do what I do. I'm the producer. I'm the director. I'm going to do what I do. And I think I hung up on Joel. And, we never really discussed it after that. But it was, I'll never forget that moment when I saw her animated, talking on the phone and knowing in my head, she called Joel. And I bet you she's complaining about me. And then sure as shooting, within 5 minutes, the phone rings. I see her hang up. She stomps into her trailer. Bang, Joel's on the phone to me. I wasn't going to allow that to happen. I just have had it. If you wanted to fire me, go fire me. It's okay.
A little disappointing to hear, but in Angie's defense, she was in Stallone's thrall. She had no idea at the time that Stallone was betraying her.
Yeah, no idea.
If you look at the scene and you see all the levels of onion.
Among the layers of onion, we became concerned that all of the fake blood we were using looked too thick in the dailies. It looked like pancake syrup. So I called Todd Masters. Help!
I remember you calling me up. For one, I was sort of surprised that everything went to Canada.
You know why that happened?
Right. And
bad reasons all the way around.
Whatever it was, but it was kind of funny in my perspective because I'm Canadian. And I'm like, well, I could legally go, but it was just like, you guys are already there. And then all of a sudden you're calling up and you're going, hey, how do we make blood?
I know you're Canadian, and I've known this recently, but I did not know you were Canadian when...
I'm a really bad Canadian. I'm a terrible Canadian.
You got to be more obvious, dude.
I look like
Smell of maple syrup or something.
You ask me how to make blood. I'm just like, how to make blood? It's in the fucking title, and the blood's terrible. If that's the question you're asking, what else is going on? And so that's when we said, well, why don't I just come up and see for myself?
Having Todd back really helped a lot. One of the scenes for which we really needed Todd's reliability was the torture chamber scene, and Todd got right to work on a terrific special effects gag that Gil wanted to do.
I had said yes to Dennis every day. Every day he wanted to be shot out early.
Yeah.
We said yes to him every single day.
Yeah.
And then this was the day of the torture chamber set.
Yeah.
And he was going to enter. So there was a cut because there was a stunt as he went over the railing, landed into the well of the torture chamber. Then he picked up an axe. And then he was going to bury it in Angie's shoulder. So then there was a lock off on the other side for a process shot.
Right.
We had 3 different pieces. And if we screwed up any one of those pieces, of course, we could take the whole day's work and throw it in the toilet. Per usual, Dennis would send his assistant to my office first thing in the morning, and she'd say the usual thing, oh, Dennis is so tired. Can we please shoot him out? And every day I'd go, yeah, sure. I'm sure she was expecting me to go, yeah. And I said, no, not today. She was like, what? I said, no. I said, look, and I will grant you, I didn't say it that nicely. I said, no, I can't, not today. And I was beside myself. I was not doing it in the kindest, most Zemeckis way possible. I said, look, I've got a stunt here. He's going to have to go there. Then I got to pick up the axe, and I got a lock off shot on the other side. And I said exactly what I just said to you. If we screw up any one of these elements, I can take the whole day's work and throw it in the.
Right.
I said, no. She said, Dennis isn't going to be happy. And then I think triggered a little something in me. And I said, I don't care. And she went, okay. And she went out to the trailer and gave Dennis the bad news. Now, I had no idea that Joel was going to be visiting today. Not that it would have changed what I said, but Joel visited that day. And of course, the first place he went was to go see Dennis, to go see his star. His star. As soon as Joel walked into the trailer, the first thing that, he said, how you doing this and this? And I'm horrible because Catsy won't let me go. Whoa. Catsy won't let you go. What do you mean you won't let you go? Well, I'm tired. I'm doing my show and you got to shoot me out. And Joel said, what? You want to go and Catsy won't shoot you out? I'll take care of Cats. And then he walked down onto the set and he found me. In one of his big Joel voices, he said, Cats. And I was standing on the other side of the building, I think.
I wonder where I was.
You were working. You were setting up a scene.
Right.
You were doing what you're supposed to be doing. So now, of course, everyone who's not on the set working with you has now turned to watch me walk across the stage to my boss. Come here. Cats, come here. Okay, now I'm walking faster. And as he approached him, he said, I got to tell you something. Your people skills are shit. Oh my God, I've just experienced the most ironic moment of my entire life. Joel Silver has just told me that my people skills are shit.
Yeah.
To Joel's credit, really, and I will give Joel full credit at the end of this story. He saw that he had broken me down and now he needed to fix me. And he said, look, you're a star. You've got to do whatever your star wants. And he talked about Bruce Willis. Unfortunately, I'm so sad for what's happened to Bruce Willis and the aphasia. But he told a story about working with Bruce Willis on the Die Hard movies. Bruce Willis was a pain in the ass, but you got to do what your star wants. And he sees that that's not making me feel any better. And then he tells me another story, a Michael Jackson story. About Michael Jackson being on the set of a music video, and everyone in the crew is told, do not talk to Michael. If you talk to Michael, you get fired. Everyone agrees, cool. The assistant set deck has a broken arm. He's got a cast on his arm. And Michael walks up to the assistant and says, hey, what's wrong with your arm? And the set deck says, oh yeah, I broke it. They fired the set deck. The next day, Joel's telling me this story. The next day, Michael shows up to work with a cast on his arm in sympathy.
And he didn't know the guy had gotten fired?
Of course he knew the guy had gotten fired. But that was his reaction. He didn't go to the producers and say, give him his job back. He let the guy be fired and he came in with his cast in sympathy for the guy who got fired because of him. And so Joel's point was, they're crazy. They're all crazy, you see? And Joel said, so he's going back to the hotel. You got to let him do whatever he wants. I went, okay. And the day's work did not turn out okay. We pretty much had to scrap that day's work, in part because we didn't have access to Dennis all day. Mm-hmm. And from that day onward, what little authority I had, teeny weeny itty bit of authority I had to tell Dennis anything, was gone. Every time I looked at Dennis, Dennis looked at me like he owned me.
No doubt.
And meanwhile, things were still happening down on that set in Seattle. Now, there's an urban legend about Sly Stallone, a live mic, his trailer, and a sex partner. Stallone, as far as I know, has never said this story never happened. The question is where, on what film set? There's always been a Vancouver connection to the story, and maybe this is it. Now, I hadn't heard this story before I did Bordello. When I heard it, it came from the set in Seattle, and it goes like this. Stallone finishes the scene and heads back to his trailer, unaware that his radio mic is still live. There's a young woman waiting for him there, and she gives Stallone a blowjob. But Sly is really particular about how he likes his hunters. And he tells the young woman to cup the balls, stroke the shaft, cup the balls, stroke the shaft. Next thing you know, a crowd has formed around the sound cart. The whole crew practically. The next morning, the story goes, Stallone walks onto the set to see the entire crew wearing t-shirts that say, cup the balls, stroke the shaft. Did it actually happen? I don't know. Did it happen on the Assassin set? I don't know. But I do know that not long after I heard that story from Seattle, Sly ended his relationship with Angie. Production manager Colleen Neistat.
When we spoke last, I couldn't remember the name of the theater that we were shooting at down on Hastings Street, and it was the Lux, and it burnt down subsequent, was been vacant and for a long time and used as a community garden subsequently. But you remember a scene she was in there as well, dressed in different outfits, doing her thing for Dennis Miller's character. And I do recall that we were shooting there when that all went down.
We were shooting at the Lux. We were on location at the Lux when the relationship ended.
Yeah.
Do you remember how he ended it with her?
No, I don't. I wasn't party.
From that point forward, of course, she was understandably a mess.
We had to deal with the aftermath of that. And the only thing we knew, because initially I was like, what happened? What's the problem? And then I said, guys, what's going on here? I mean, Angie, what happened? What are you so upset about? I mean, there's nothing we can't fix. What is it? And then she told me, Stallone and I are no more. I mean, she didn't go into any detail. And then she was very teary-eyed, and she just said, in a very tearful way, that's what happened. And I was like, fuck me, what do I do about this? How do I play this to get again, I'm trying to make a movie. I'm trying to get performance. So, I tried to be as kind as I could. And I said, this is an opportunity for us to make something special. You're not getting any more guidance from him, which I think is a blessing for both of us, not just for me. And I said, let's just continue and let's show him, and we'll make the best movie we can. What do you say? But then, as the day progressed, she would fall into lapses of melancholy, and it was very difficult to get a performance out of her. I'd have to stop. And I remember one or two times I would take her for a walk off the set, and we would just walk, around a little bit, and we would just chat about nothing. Meantime, I'm realizing my time is being suckered away, which is unfortunate because it impacted the shooting. But, there was nothing else I could do. I had to get her mind to a place where she could concentrate on character and what the task was at that particular moment.
Even when Stallone was gone,
he wasn't gone. Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
It was sad. It was a sad situation, for a number of years, I think after the movie, I would run into Angie at a restaurant or something, and she was always very grateful and also very sweet to me and to my wife. As time passed, we went our own ways.
I think the very next weekend is the weekend that I decided I had to get the fuck out of Dodge. I had to go back to LA to get a little sanity, which is nuts, which is craziness. Sly had already broken up with Angie. Everything was just going to hell. And I get on the Alaska Airlines flight. I'm the only passenger in first class, 3 rows of 2. So
right.
We were holding it for one last first class passenger. They'd given me my glass of whatever it was that I wanted to drink. Then the other first class passenger enters. It's Angie. Of course, I'm surprised, delighted, surprised. And I get up and say, hey, Angie. And I hug Angie. And, Angie is a beautiful woman. She's a supermodel.
Yeah.
And everyone on the plane is now tilting their head into the aisle to see who's the schlub the supermodel's kissing. And I got to tell you, it's so empowering. It's remarkable to realize that people are looking at you like, well, hey, you must be someone. A beautiful woman is hugging you.
Right.
And Angie then, she sits next to me. We're the only 2 passengers, and she sits next to me. And she spent the whole flight back to LA lamenting about Stallone.
Yeah.
I sat there the whole time thinking how we had betrayed her.
Yeah.
While I'm confessing, there's something else I need to get off my chest. It's the most painful irony in a story chock-a-block with damn stuff. The thing is, when Joel told me, "Cats, your people skills are shit," the irony wasn't actually Joel Silver telling me my people skills sucked. The irony was, he was right. A guy with crap people skills saw clearly that we had tons in common. All I had to do that day was act like a producer and tell Dennis's assistant, hey, you know what? Let me talk to Dennis. I'll explain it. I bet if I had done that, walked out to Dennis's trailer and had a simple conversation with the man, he would have understood why just that one day we needed him to hang around with us. Alas, I didn't do that. But back to the airplane. As Angie told me stories about the good times with her former fiancé, a line from one of Stallone's movies suddenly popped into my head like an earworm that wouldn't leave.
The Lords of Flatbush.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where his girlfriend, he has a problem, and his girlfriend threatens, I'm going to tell everyone that you cry when you come. As Angie is telling me story after story about the good times with Sly.
Right.
And she was missing him. But glad that it was over because she was now aware that he had not been faithful to her.
Yeah.
And all I can think is he cries when he comes.
It was the most painful plane ride I have ever experienced, sitting beside a remarkably beautiful woman and a lovely human being.
Yeah.
Who I had betrayed. Mia maxima culpa.
Mr. Stallone, Sly if I may, What you do in your private life is none of my business, unless you make it my business, which you did. That's my issue with you. I think your politics are stupid, but that's a whole other podcast. You want to break up with your romantic partner, that's your deal. But you made us your co-conspirators in treating a very nice person like shit. Do better, please. At least grow the fuck up. And don't cry when you come. Please stay tuned for Part 5. It's coming right up in episode 24.